All right, everyone, welcome back to another video, and you can also catch me over at Daily Colts. Today, we're diving into the Denver Broncos. Now, this isn't just about our matchup with them, though we'll touch on that, but more about where we stand heading into this crucial game. I've watched every Broncos game this season. They're sitting at 8-5, and while they've been solid, they're not unbeatable. A few weeks ago, I might have thought differently, but things have changed for us. Ever since Anthony Richardson came back from being benched, he's been a completely different quarterback. I genuinely believe Richardson has the talent to go on the road, take on Denver, and shock them. If we pull off this win, it'll turn some heads. Let's be real. The Colts aren't exactly viewed as contenders. At 6-7 and under .500, people don't expect much from us. And it's understandable. But here's the thing, most of our losses, except one, have been by a single score. The only blowout was against the Bills, who are arguably one of the top teams in the league, right up there with the Detroit Lions. The other losses, Packers, Texans, twice, Jaguars, and Vikings, all within 7 points. For the Colts, the key is to show up big against Denver. We can't afford to lose this one. The Broncos beat the Browns last night, so the stakes are even higher now. If we lose to Denver, our playoff hopes are practically gone, unless we somehow win the division. But let's be honest, that's a long shot. We'd need the Texans to lose all 4 of their remaining games while we win our next 3. It's possible, but highly unlikely. So this game against Denver is do or die for us. If we lose, it'll be frustrating because I can easily see us winning the final 3 games after that, which would just leave us with a mediocre record and a worse draft pick. Don't get me wrong, I'd never want the Colts to intentionally tank. That's not how you build a winning culture or a strong franchise, but as a fan, it's tough. You either want to make the playoffs or have a shot at drafting a top-tier player. Last season, we ended up with the 15th pick. Not good enough to contend, but not bad enough to land a superstar. It's a frustrating middle ground. But at the end of the day, I'd rather see us win these next 4 games. It's year 2 for Anthony Richardson, and every win is a building block for his growth and the team's future. If we make the playoffs, the focus will shift to preparing for next season. Ideally, this means making some big changes like firing Chris Ballard and Gus Bradley. We need a GM who's more aggressive in building a competitive team and a defensive coordinator who will attack rather than sit back in a soft zone that quarterbacks can easily exploit. The Colts have potential, but the big question is whether they can reach it. We've had solid teams in recent years, but they haven't gone far. A lot of that has been due to the quarterback position. Now, with Anthony Richardson under center, it feels like we've found our guy. Yes, he's young and makes mistakes, but he also makes incredible plays that only a handful of quarterbacks in the league can pull off. Think Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and maybe Lamar Jackson. Richardson belongs in that conversation already. Heading into this Denver matchup, the stakes couldn't be higher. We're 6-7, and they're 8-5. A win would move us to 7-7 and drop them to 8-6. Keeping our playoff hopes alive. Of course, we'd still need some help from other teams, but it's not out of the question. Looking at Denver's remaining schedule, things get interesting. They have to face the Los Angeles Chargers on the road. While the Broncos could win that game, I'm leaning toward the Chargers. They're slightly better, especially at home, and Justin Herbert is on another level compared to Denver's rookie quarterback, even if he's promising. Then there's Cincinnati. The Bengals are 4-8 and technically still in playoff contention if they win out and get some help. By week 17, their starters should still be playing, but will they have the same urgency as Denver? If the Bengals are fully motivated, they'll likely win because they can simply outscore the Broncos. Denver's defense might limit them to 30 points, but Cincinnati could easily put up 38. Finally, we have Kansas City, and this is where it gets tricky. If the Chiefs clinch the numso 1 seed early, especially if the Bills drop a couple of games, they'll likely rest their starters. That would be a huge break for Denver. The Chiefs' backups aren't beating a Denver team fighting for their playoff lives. As a Colts fan, it's tough to rely on other teams losing, but that's where we are. Still, our path is clear. Beat the Broncos, keep winning, and hope for some help along the way. I have a bit of a concern, but if you're a Colts fan listening right now, shout out to you. If you're watching this video just for fun, that's cool too. Here's the deal. As a Colts fan, we need to cheer for the Bills to keep winning. Let's take a look at their upcoming games. I'm curious about who they're playing next. All right, here we go. The Buffalo Bills are facing the Rams next, and then they'll be at Detroit, followed by games against New England and the New York Jets. Right now, the Bills are one game behind the Chiefs, but they have the tiebreaker. I think they'll beat the Rams, but that game might be closer than expected since the Rams really need a win to keep their playoff hopes alive. Then, they play against the Lions in Detroit. Honestly, if anyone can go in there and win, it's the Bills. But if they do lose to the Lions and the Chiefs win, suddenly we're in a tough spot with 2 games to catch up. So I'm rooting for the Bills. Normally, I'd support an NFC team over an AFC team, but we're not catching the Bills in the standings anyway. Now let's talk about the Colts. If we beat the Broncos, we'll be 7. If the Broncos lose to us, they'll be 8-6, and if they lose to the Chargers, they'll drop to 8-7. If we beat the Titans, we'll be over .500 at 8-5, which ties us with the Broncos. But since we beat them, we'll have the tiebreaker. Next, we'll be at home against Jacksonville, which is a relief. If we had to go to Jacksonville, I'd feel like our season was over, but we can finish strong. After the Titans, we'll face the Giants and then the Jaguars. We could end up 10-7. Finishing with a record of 10-7 makes a lot of sense. We could still win our division or grab the last playoff spot. The great thing about beating Denver is that it puts us in a better position. Everyone thought we needed that game against Detroit, but beating Denver was the key. Now let me quickly check the Texans' schedule because they're also in the mix. All right, let's dive into the Texans' situation because they have a tough road ahead if they want to win the South. I really think they're going to struggle. Looking at their schedule, I don't believe they'll win against the Dolphins. The Texans have been having a hard time lately. They lost to the Titans at home, and the Jaguars almost beat them too. I think the Dolphins will take that game, especially since the weather in Houston will be warm, probably in the 60s or 70s. Next, they have to face the Chiefs, and I don't see them winning that one either. If they lose both those games, they'll drop to 8-7. On the other hand, if the Colts win their next 2 games, we'll also be at 8-7. But because the Texans have the tiebreaker, they would still be ahead of us. After that, the Texans will play the Ravens and then the Titans. Both of those games will be tough for them. The Titans already beat the Texans once, and now they'll be at home, which makes it even harder. The Ravens will also be a challenge. If the Texans lose those 3 games in a row and the Colts win their next 3, we'd be sitting pretty at 9-7 while they would be 8-8. That means the Colts would have a better record. Even if the Texans win their last game against us, as long as we beat the Jaguars at home, we'd finish ahead of them. So the Colts are in a really interesting position. They need some help, but I believe it's possible for things to go their way. If the Colts can win their next 4 games, they'll pretty much secure a playoff spot. Of course, it's not guaranteed since the Texans or Broncos could also win their games, which would complicate things. But if the Colts take care of business and finish at 10-7, I think we'll be just fine.